All right, please feel free to say hello in the chat. And if you have questions or comments or feedback, we are certainly welcome to put that there. Yes, and thanks to Miranda for being on today's call. She will be helping with all of the behind the scenes today. So we have some upcoming events for y'all, health screenings, wellness classes, and programs that we want you to be aware of. Of course, the best way to know this information is to go to wellness.ua.edu and sign up for our newsletter. Miranda and Carolyn and Ashley do a phenomenal job with all things wellness and work life. And I just get the pleasure of getting to join you for webinars. So we would love for you to be able to participate in the upcoming screenings. You know, if you complete all three of these components, you get up to $100 in gift cards. And so we want you to take advantage of that as a benefit of your employment here at UA. So we will move on to the next slide and get started with our content for today. So cultivating work-life balance. I usually present this with my good friend and colleague, Allison Currington, but she had an unfortunate scheduling issue that she could not help and that we could not reschedule. And so we will miss Allison today, but I am going to cover her content with your permission and with her permission. So my name is Abby Horton. I am an assistant professor at the Capstone College of Nursing here at UA. I'm a registered nurse. I am also a certified health and life coach. I'm a wellbeing ambassador for the Honors College where I teach part-time, and I'm your wellness class educator. If you would like to contact me, my email is abby.horton@ua.edu. I know oftentimes we have questions that we may think of later or that we may want to ask individually, or you may think of something or want a resource or just to connect. So feel free to reach out. And this is my good friend, Allison. She is a licensed clinical social worker and she teaches in the School of Social Work here at UA. And she is also a certified life coach and she specializes in leadership development and leadership coaching. And her email is listed here for you. It's amcurrington@sw.ua.edu. So she also is available if you would like to reach out. So our goals today are to talk about work-life balance and really to think about work-life balance as more of work-life harmony. We're going to discuss the importance of stress management, and then we're going to talk about specific strategies to adopt a healthy work-life balance. So our disclaimer is that this is just for educational purposes only. We want you to focus on what you can control. We want you to take what resonates with you and leave the rest. So I always say to treat the information that we share like a menu and or like a buffet. You just pick and choose what you think will work for you, and then the rest of the information, maybe come back to it later because we all are in different seasons of our lives, and so you may need a little bit of help with self-compassion right now, but later on you might need some logistical or practical examples of how you can manage work-life balance. I always like to say to take baby steps, that small progress is still progress, and that is a quotable from Laura Casey, and she does a lot around health and wellness and life goal setting, and she owns a small business in North Carolina. And then reach out if you do have questions or if you have feedback. We would love to hear that as well. So self-compassion, this is Allison's favorite topic. Self-compassion involves acting the same way towards yourself when you're having a difficult time, when you fail, or when you notice that there's something you don't like about yourself. And so that's a quote by Christine Neff. And we would love for you to be able to take the complete self-compassion inventory. It usually takes about 5 to 8 minutes. And so we're going to give that to you as a link before we close out today. We also can send that out as an email with the slides if y'all would like that. Miranda will also put the slides in the chat for you. And so when you think about self-compassion, there are a couple of areas where you can struggle. You can struggle in self-judgment, you can struggle in isolation, and you can struggle in over-identification. And so I think it's really important for us to understand where we are most challenged. And a lot of times it's that we are too hard on ourselves. And so self-compassion is a tool, much like gratitude and much like reflective journaling, that you can use to be able to start to make some inroads in your work-life balance stressors. Oftentimes when we are stressed or we feel like we don't have enough time or we feel like that we're out of balance, it's because we are overcommitting and we're over expecting results from ourselves. So we're trying to be robotic in our productivity without giving ourselves compassion and without giving ourselves rest. And so I want y'all to think about that. The three elements of self-compassion looks at self-kindness versus self-judgment. So how often are you judging yourselves? How often are you being critical? We all have a little bit of an inner critic, but some of us struggle with that more than others. And I'm definitely someone who struggles with the inner critic and a self-judgment. Common humanity versus isolation. And so, how much are you reaching out for connectedness? How much are you reaching out for your community? Do you have support? Do you have someone that you can call if you're having a hard day? And then how much are you spending your time in isolation? So are you often in a cubicle or in your office or in some other space where you're not in community with others who are having similar challenges or similar stressors? That can be really helpful to identify. And then mindfulness over identification. That's so important to think about because sometimes when we over identify as being productive or when we over identify as being a certain way, if we then lose that part of ourselves, we can really become overwhelmed and we can feel like that we're burned out or that we're having a lot of stressors or mental health challenges because we're over identifying with our professional work or with our career or with maybe a label. And so I talk about this with my nursing students a lot where they really tend to have a difficult transition from lower division to upper division in first semester of nursing school because they've over identified as a high achiever or as an A or A plus student. And then when they get to nursing school and they've, experienced their first challenges, their first B's, their first, kind of difficult moments in academia, because they've over identified as a high achiever or as an A plus student, then they sometimes have this, identity crisis where if I'm not a A plus student, then who am I? And so we do the same thing. We are sometimes over identifying in our roles or in our productivity or in our outcomes and achievement, and we're not being mindful. And so I think that's important to think of, what is the struggle here? What's my biggest challenge? And you can struggle with all three. I certainly do at times struggle with self-judgment, isolation, and over-identification. And sometimes on some days, one might be a little bit more predominant than another. So be gentle with yourself and recognize that we all need grace and that we're all human and we're all going to make mistakes. We aren't robots and we are going to have challenges. So practicing self-compassion. How would you treat a friend? And I think this is so great because Allison and I are friends in real life. And so when we are having moments where we need some encouragement or support, a lot of times we need the reminder that, how would we treat our friend if Allison were to call me and say, this happened, this situation is causing a struggle for me, I would respond very differently to, something that she perceived as a stressor or challenge or struggle or failure than I would to myself. And so we often will remind each other of that in our personal lives. We'll remind each other, well, you would never say that to me. Why would you say that to yourself? And a lot of times we all can see that in our own relationships with ourselves and with others, that we are kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. Not everyone struggles with that, but a lot of people do, especially people who are more likely to be people pleasers or identify as helpers. That's something that you can really see in those relationships and those dynamics as they play out. So when you think about sometimes when you're struggling or when you're feeling bad about something, how do you typically respond to yourselves in those situations? What is your inner dialogue? And then how would you respond to that friend? And do you notice a difference if your friend were in the same situation? I also like to do this in terms of advice. We sometimes want to look outside of ourselves for advice or for help. And I think oftentimes we know the answer, we just haven't given ourselves permission or time or self-reflection or space to realize that we probably are in tune with what we need to do. It's just often easier to ask someone else. And so, think about that the next time that you're in a situation where you're not sure what to do, when you're not sure where you need to make choices in, obtaining a healthier work-life balance. you know, if you objectively look at the situation, what would you tell a friend about that? You probably already know what you should do, but you just haven't really kind of done that inner reflection and made the choice. So I want you to think about writing down some things that you might change in how you respond to yourself and how you might look at things differently when you perceive yourself as being, challenged with something or maybe having a failure. How can you show up for yourself differently? And then consider, why not try treating yourself like a good friend and see what happens. So oftentimes we get in this routine of responding in a certain way. And so sometimes the inner critic that we have is actually our own voice, our own kind of self-dialogue and self-talk. But sometimes we have actually taken on the dialogue of others. And so if you had a parent or a teacher or another authority figure like a coach or an adult in your life who was overly harsh or critical when you were growing up, those are really pivotal moments in our lives, that early adolescence and then, our K through 12 days. And so those are fundamental times of development. And we can sometimes hear in our own kind of internal dialogue, our own internal voice, these criticisms. But I want you to also think about asking, is that a criticism that you originated? That you thought of, or is that something that you've adopted? Maybe a parent or teacher or coach or someone else said those kinds of things to you. Maybe they said that you weren't organized, or maybe they said that you were being lazy, or maybe they had some other criticism of you and you've adopted that and you've over identified it or over labeled yourself with that. And sometimes, as adults, and we know this, if you're a parent or grandparent on the call or you've been around children, we sometimes will say things that we don't mean or that we are only meaning in the moment, or maybe we're meaning, in a joking way, or saying, oh, you're being so lazy right now, get up and do your chores. But that voice can become something that is more adapted to how we think about ourselves. And so we need to be really mindful of our words, not only our words that we use with others, but the words that we use with ourselves, because we create that reality with how we think about ourselves in different situations. So in work, we think about work as, just our 9 to 5 job, but work can be anything that we're doing for our professional lives. And it can be service, it can be lots of different things. Whether we're in a faculty role or a staff role, we have many different components to the work that we do. It's not just the desk work that we have, but it's much more than we can even encompass in this presentation. But we want to think about work and then life as being our personal components. And workplace burnout surveys have shown that most people say they are burned out, that they're feeling stressed, that they're having a personal or professional impact because of this burnout. And burnout is much more than just we're having stress related to work, but it's truly feeling disconnected from our meaning and our purpose in what we do every day. It's having stressors that go beyond just the 9 to 5, that we experience. And of course, we're usually 8 to 4:45 here at UA. But, that varies depending on our roles and responsibilities. We can often feel like we never get to disconnect or clock out. As a nurse, a lot of times I use the clocking out analogy. Unless you truly have a job where you clock out, you often feel like you're always on. And so one example, I have young children, and I will tell them when it gets to be about bedtime, if we have a child that doesn't want to go to sleep, or, a child that's being especially, kind of one-to-one needing some extra attention that day. If I am to the point where I know that I need some rest and that mentally I need to disconnect for a few minutes, I will tell them, okay, I'm clocking out for the night. Do y'all need anything else? Kind of last call. Do you need anything else before we go to bed? And obviously, that's kind of used in a silly way. My children are aged 10 to 15, almost 15. And so mine are a little bit older, and I can clock out a little bit more now that they're in that later elementary, middle school age, high school age. But, sometimes we can't. When they were young, there was no clocking out. And so we've got to think about the seasons of life that we're in. Where do we need to put in breaks? Where do we need to put in, kind of stopgap measures where when we're having some difficult times, do we need a break at home? Do we need a break at work? Take your lunch break. I think so oftentimes we forget to take our dedicated lunch break. Take your hour lunch break and really disconnect. If you're always eating lunch at your desk, maybe you need to go out and meet, for, an hour, meet your friend for lunch near campus, so that you get a change of scenery. If you can't, for some reason, take a lunch break outside of the workplace for whatever reason, maybe it's that you go eat lunch with a friend in their office, or the break room if you have one handy, or maybe it's that you go outside and get some good vitamin D, some good sunshine, and just get away from your desk. Or if you eat lunch at your desk every day, maybe it's that you put on a podcast or some music and close out your Outlook if that's constantly kind of dinging in the background with notifications. There's lots of things that we can do to combat workplace burnout, but I think we have to recognize that we need to actually be proactive, and that we need to set boundaries, and that by doing so, we show up better for ourselves and for others. I see a comment or question. I'm laughing right now because I'm eating lunch at my desk. I love that. Well, that's my example because I do the same thing. I often will work through lunch. So, but I think it's good. That is another good way to get in lunch and kind of multitask. I don't like to multitask a lot because our brains are really not designed to multitask well. Y'all will probably remember 10 or 15 years ago, it was all in vogue to say that you were a great multitasker. But we have enough research on the brain right now to know that that's actually not something the brain does well. And so while people may still want to hear that you're a good multitasker, the truth is that the more that we task switch, so going back and forth between different things, the more we wear our brains out, the less energy we have. And that's probably contributing a whole lot to our burnout. It's the way that we approach work. It's not necessarily the work itself. And so that's something to consider. Is if you're constantly task switching, going back and forth between different emails and adding things to your calendar, and then taking a phone call, and then getting a text message on your phone, and then having a knock at your door. Or if you're in a cubicle space where you don't have a door, you're constantly getting interrupted. Maybe you need to post a sign on your door or cubicle space that says, please don't interrupt for, whatever designated period of time. Those are the kinds of boundaries I'm talking about that will help make life a little bit easier, a little simpler. Yes. Okay. So Latara said I had to learn to do that. If I ever ate lunch at my desk, I was constantly checking emails. I know I do the same thing. I don't know why we do that, but it's probably a habit we just haven't thought to change really. All right. I love that. Yes, y'all keep putting those kinds of things in the chat. It's very validating that we're on the right track with this. So are you stressed or is it burned out? And, it can be both. I think a lot of times when we're saying, is it this or is it that? It's usually a combination of the two. And stress underlies burnout. And you're going to be stressed before you're burned out usually. That's not always the case. Sometimes burnout is just like you're just done. It's not that you're overly stressed. It's just that you're not getting fulfillment. So burnout can be about fulfillment too. It may not be that you have an exaggerated stress response. I typically have a pretty strong stress response to things, but burnout can just mean I'm just not feeling fulfilled in this role, or that I have expectations that are not being met. So stress is characterized by overengagement. Your emotions tend to be overreactive. You can definitely see that when you're having physical health concerns too. Maybe you're sick. Maybe you aren't getting a good enough sleep. Maybe you're not getting quality or quantity of hours. You tend to have this sense of urgency and hyperactivity. So everything feels like a crisis, everything feels like a disaster because you're at the max capacity. And so one more email notification is all it does to kind of, set off that stress response. There's definitely characterization of loss of energy. And again, it's because our brains use percentage wise from all of our other organs, it uses the most of our calories. So the caloric intake that we take in every day, your brain is using about a fourth to a fifth of those calories. Um, and it's something because we liken the brain to a computer, and mental health and the brain are my research areas and the things that I love the most. So I will definitely nerd out a little bit about the facts around this, but when we think about the brain, a lot of times we compare it to a computer, and I like that analogy, but also our brain is like a computer in a lot of ways, but it's not in a lot of important ways too. And so we can't expect for our brains to process like a computer. It just doesn't. So I think we sometimes expect too much. And then we can have anxiety disorders. Sometimes anxiety disorders underlie the stress that we're having because we're not managing our anxiety or our depression or our other mental health challenges well. So an example of that is that 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, depending on the statistics, are that you will have a mild mental health diagnosis, and mild means mild depression, anxiety, stress more than the norm, those sorts of things. A severe mental health concern or mental health challenge would be something more like mental health challenges related to bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, and that's 1 in 25. And so that means that we know someone or we are someone who struggles with anxiety, depression, stress, that sort of thing. All of those things can contribute to burnout, but it's not the only thing. And so you also can have, a shortened lifespan, or you can have poor health outcomes if you're continuing to have stress. Burnout is more characterized by disengagement, and that may look like numbing out. That may look like scrolling social media. That may look like eating a lot of carbs and sugar. Your emotions are usually blunted. So we call that flat affect in nursing, meaning that there's just no response. Their voice is pretty monotone. Their reactions are pretty monotone. That can be a sign for sure that someone's really progressed to burnout. You can feel hopeless or helpless. You can have a lack of motivation, and you can really get disconnected from your ideals, your values, the hope that you've had. It can lead to detachment and depression, or worse than those things if that's already a concern. Can lead to damage to the emotional responses, and it can make life seem not worth living. And so that's something to really consider. Are you in that stage of burnout? And it is a continuum. So you don't just go from stress to burnout. There's a range that you can experience. And certainly burnout is going to be more severe typically. Right. So there's a quote that I think is really helpful. The stress itself will kill you faster than the stressor will, unless you do something to complete the stress response cycle. While you're managing the day's stressors, your body is managing the day's stress. It's absolutely essential to your well-being that you give your body the resources it needs to complete the stress response cycles that have been activated. And so here's what I'm going to say about that. We often think about, oh, we have a vote of goodwill toward this podcast. Good, Francis, I'm glad you like it. Great. We love when y'all endorse the things that we share. So the stress response, we often are taught about the saber-toothed tiger, and that we're going to have the fight or flight response. So meaning we're going to, in prehistoric days, we're going to face the tiger, the saber-toothed tiger, and we're going to fight it, or we're going to turn around and run. We're going to flee or flight. But there are many more stress responses than just those two. And that's what we typically see people talk about, fighting or fleeing. Well, there's also one where we freeze. And I think that's the most common stress response that I see from, certainly professionals, people in higher education. I just think freeze response tends to be what we're doing because we're overwhelmed. We have so much information that we don't know what to do, and we feel stuck. So if you have, a conversation and you say, I just feel stuck, I don't know what to do, I feel overwhelmed, you're probably experiencing the freeze response. And so the way to complete the stress response cycle is that you do something. It's not that you think about it, although I love to think and I love to do, different things that, kind of, can keep you in a stress response cycle, that the numbing out, that's just human nature to avoid pain. And so it's not that numbing out is bad or that, that it's, something you can, avoid all the time. You're not, you can't. Our bodies are hardwired to, and our brains are hardwired to protect ourselves. And so numbing out is a way of protecting ourselves from psychological pain and stress. So it's quote unquote normal to do that, but you can't stay there. And so to complete a stress cycle, you need to get up literally and move your body. That's why exercise on a regular basis is so helpful. That doesn't mean that you're doing a CrossFit, high intensity interval training, marathon, exercise every day. Walking, I think, is the best way to complete the stress response cycle. I think it's the healthiest thing to do for exercise overall, other than weightlifting. Weightlifting is really amazing and helpful for you. But walking is something that most people can do. It's free, it can be fun, and it doesn't have to be a lot of stress on your body. You will have a stress response in your body if you're going and doing a high intensity interval workout like CrossFit or Orange Theory. So if you're dealing with autoimmune issues, if you're having a lot of stress, if you're not sleeping well, and then you're going and doing those really intense workouts, your body is going to be more stressed and more inflamed because it just can't handle it right now. So the kindest thing to do is work on your sleep and your hydration and to walk. So if you were to get a really stressful email when we get off this call today, and you hear that notification from Outlook and you see the email and you immediately feel flooded. And flooded is when all of those hormones release. Think about when you almost hit the car in front of you. Everyone had that sensation, I'm sure. And you feel like, oh my goodness, your heart drops and you feel flooded with chemicals and you're like, oh my goodness, I've got a break or I'm going to hit that car. That is the feeling that you get every time you get a notification from Outlook and you think it's going to be an upsetting email. That's the sensation you get every time you have a stress response to something that feels unpleasant. It may not be to the degree that you have it when you're trying to slam your brakes and avoid the car in front of you, but it is a stress response that you can feel at a physiological cellular level. And that's going to change how well you show up. That's going to contribute to stress. That's going to contribute to burnout. So getting up and moving your body, it's just like with a saber-toothed tiger. You've got to face it and fight and move your body in that way, or you've got to run away and flee, and you're moving your body by running and getting away from the threat. The problem is that we can't run away from our email, or for my students, from their grades, or, from the relationship challenges we have, the work challenges we have. We can't literally run away, but what we can do is we can get up, we can do some squats by our desk. We can go and walk around our building. We can go outside even better and get some fresh air. And moving our body is going to help get those hormones that flood us and that are preparing us to flee or to fight, get those out of our body. And within about 2 or 3 minutes, that hormonal response will clear. And if you're still feeling stressed after that, or you're feeling the physical effects after that, it's probably because you're doing what's called rumination and you're thinking about the stressor. And every time you think about that stressor, you're having the same response as if it happened again. I know this from a professional perspective, and I also know this personally because I struggle with the things that I'm talking to you about today. We often research and teach the things that we struggle with ourselves. And so I'm telling you, as someone who has worked on this and is still working on it myself. All right. Y'all are walking. Christy and Victoria are walking while listening. I love that too. That's so great. Yes, getting outdoors is so helpful. Close your door and you do squats or counter push-ups in your office. I also love that. That's great. There's some great desk exercises that you can do at your desk, using your chair to get some good movement in. It's really not about the 1 hour that we work out every day. And it's really about the purposeful movement that we do throughout the day. It's parking in the back of the grocery store parking lot or the work parking lot. It's getting up from your desk every hour and going and seeing a neighbor, getting some water. It's doing some squats before you answer the next round of emails. It's that purposeful movement that really contributes more so to your overall health. Now, cardiovascular health in terms of walking, weightlifting to strengthen your bones and muscles, that's really, really important, but you're not probably going to reach your health goals just by doing that 30 minutes to an hour of an exercise if you're not being, active the rest of the 24 hours. You just missed the day. Yeah, and I love having a standing desk. Standing desks are really helpful. I don't have one right now, but I'm really excited about getting one that we can use at home and at work so that I can be at least on my feet a little bit more often. So that's really helpful. Yeah. And y'all can reach out to usually your building managers to have a standing desk. You can ask if that's something that your department will cover. I think that's great. And they've got some really good choices on Amazon for a few $100s that you can get that actually has an automatic button to lift, kind of like our new podiums that are accessible, that rise and lower to be able, or raise and lower to be able to accommodate different heights and ability statuses. And so that's really great too, because then you don't have to have a lot of upper body strength to use the manual desk. So that's another one to think about. So heavy workloads and caseloads, urgent deadlines, low quality supervision or management, unhealthy work environments, inability to complete tasks, work conflict, and just relationship conflict in general, and rapidly changing work environments are all considered to be factors that correlate with stress at work. And there are many more, and you'll know that. You know what's causing your stress, probably. If you don't sit down and just jot down a few things that you think are contributing to your personal work-life stress. And then it may be that you just have a lot of great things going on. Sometimes it's not that there's anything quote unquote bad happening. It's that you just have a lot going on at one time and you're feeling overwhelmed. Maureen just put in the chat, spotlighting someone who brought a bike desk to use at her office. Yeah, and I had a colleague that got a fitness ball, one of the inflatable fitness balls, and used that. And it was a large one, so she was at the right height in terms of ergodynamics, but she actually would sit on that to engage her core and just to keep her kind of aware of her body. So she would use that part of the day instead of just a desk chair, which I love that. I think that's a great idea too. So work performance declines, irritability and mood changes happen, loss of engagement, and physical distress or sickness. So if you're noticing that you're getting sick more, it may be because you're having a lot of stress, or maybe it's that your workload, or just, and I mean workload for personal and for work, maybe it's just more than you can do and take care of yourselves well. So that's something to consider. Are you having noticeable signs and symptoms of too much stress or too much on your plate or too much in terms of burnout? So with that being said, finding balance is important. And you see these stacked stones here. I reference this a good bit when I talk about mental health or self-care, but these stacked stones are called cairns. You see them a lot in the Pacific Northwest, with them being these, art forms of stacked stones. And when you have multiple images of them, you can see that they're all finding balance and they're all stacked differently. And I think that's so important, that finding balance for me is going to look different than finding balance for other folks on the call. It would be different for Allison. It would be different for Miranda. I'm using them as examples because I know them personally, but we all have different kids in different stages of life, different numbers of kids. We all have different outside obligations. We have different work responsibilities. And so what works for me is not going to work for Miranda, is not going to work for Allison in the same way. But there are some things that you can do that will almost universally help to find this balance or harmony. And so finding a mantra, so, it might be that, simple is best, or it might be, find joy in every day. Any kind of little mantra that's going to help center you and navigate a day where you're maybe having some stress. planning and agenda setting. So this is what I call calendaring. So sitting down with your calendar, syncing it up with your work and with your home and with the different people in your life to make sure that everything's on the calendar. Taking frequent breaks, using breathing techniques can be so helpful. There are YouTube videos and there are apps that help you with breathing. There's something called boxed breathing where you breathe in for 4, out for 4, in for 4, out for 4. And so it's creating this box. And that can help reset your nervous system where you, at a physiological level, are changing how you're breathing. Moving in nature. So, our friends who are out on their walk right now, that's great. I have a good friend who loves nature and green space research. And he shared with me at a conference this summer that 21.9 minutes in nature, especially if you're moving in nature, at that point, if once you reach 21.9 minutes, so we'll say 22 minutes, then you are getting the physical effects of lowering your cortisol and improving your mental health. So that goes hand in hand with the recommendation to get 15 to 30 minutes of sunshine for vitamin D synthesis a day. So then that also lines up with our recommendation to get at least 30 minutes of movement a day. So if you go outside in the sun for 30 minutes and you walk, and it can be a fast paced or a more leisurely walk, you are doing such great things for your body. So that would be my recommendation. 30 minutes outside at a moderate pace in the sunshine, you're doing like 3 things at the same time to help your body and your brain. And let's see, something uplifting. So that's something that you can build into your day based on what you enjoy. Is it listening to one of your favorite Spotify music playlists? It is for me. So there are a lot of good ones out there. Is it that you're going to listen to a podcast? Is it that you're going to text a friend? Is it that you're going to use an app to send you helpful motivation? Those are all things that you can do for an uplifting, kind of highlight of your day. One thing that I read recently, and I think this is so good because I'm so future focused and goal oriented that I'm always living in the future. I am in this afternoon. I'm thinking about tomorrow. I'm thinking about 5 years from now. I'm usually never automatically in the present, and I don't tend to stay too much in the past. But being present focused is helpful when we think about gratitude and we think about stress. Because if you're always reliving moments from the past or you're always planning for the future and you're not in the present moment, and I say if you're not where your feet are, right? If you're not present where your feet are, then you're probably having some regrets or you're probably having some anxiety about the future. And so gratitude is really about keeping us grounded in the moment. So listing out some things you're grateful for. But what I want to say to this is gratitude is an entire talk that I've done. I've spent an hour talking about gratitude. And what I want to highlight in just this minute or so is that don't make gratitude something to do. When we make finding balance or finding harmony, and we make self-care or healthy living, when we make that another to-do list item, then we take the joy out of it sometimes, unless you are like me and you just like to-dos. But if you're already feeling stressed and burned out, if you just are like, well, I didn't do 3 gratitudes today, so obviously, I didn't write that down anywhere. So obviously, I just, I failed at that today. I don't get my check mark for today. Y'all, I say that because that's how I am. If anyone knows me in real life, this is how I am. So I'm telling myself this too. That is not what gratitude is really about. That is what we have commercialized gratitude to be. But if you just sit down and take a moment to write a thank you note, that's how I started my day today. I sat down and I wrote a thank you note. And the gratitude I felt while writing that thank you note actually made me tearful. And I'm not a big crier. But it was something that I needed to sit down and write this note. And I was putting it off. And when I sat down and wrote it, I felt a little tearful, a little emotional about it. And I thought, okay, this is probably why I had some resistance to writing this, because I knew kind of without thinking about it that this was going to be hard for me to do. And so we sometimes avoid that pain or, those unpleasant moments by not practicing gratitude. We sometimes make it a to-do list item because we want credit for it. We want to give ourselves credit for doing it. But if you just pause, after this call is over and think, I'm really grateful for Allison. She always shows up for me when I need her. She always makes time to put me on the calendar to have lunch with me. And I'm just glad that I have a friend that I can text if I need someone. That is gratitude, and that is every bit as valid as sitting down every night and writing down 3 arbitrary things that we're grateful for. So I want y'all to think about that as you move forward. Yeah, attitude of gratitude. Thanks, Gina. All right, we've got some great comments. Oh, thanks for being so active in the chat today. Hydration and nourishment are also important. For this kind of talk, and if y'all come to my other talks, y'all know I like to give stories. I think it makes it personal. It also makes you not just a content expert, but it makes you a real human who's trying your best to do the things you're teaching. I have, for the last couple of weeks, been having kidney stone pain, and I have not felt well. And I didn't recognize that I wasn't feeling well. I thought I was just being, overly tired, or, that it was just a stressful time. The next couple of weeks, there's a lot going on for me personally and professionally. And I actually didn't recognize that I was having true health issues. And so it was not until I had the actual physical evidence of a kidney stone on Sunday that I recognized that I had been having a lot of low back pain and that I just had not felt well. And that no matter how much I hydrated, I just, wasn't ever feeling like I was getting enough hydration in. Y'all, you should not need, I say this to myself, I should not have needed an actual kidney stone on Sunday to know that something was off. And so I immediately went to, is it burnout? Is it stress? Is it that I'm not sleeping well? But I was so busy that I wasn't paying attention to my body, and I wasn't recognizing the signs and symptoms it was giving me. So this is a very helpful time for us to revisit this, because, the thing is that we all need reminders. We all get busy. We all try to do too much. And it's just so important that we stay attuned to what is going on with our bodies and with our brains. Otherwise, it's going to keep giving us red flags and signals and notifications. And sometimes it's in the way of a sleepless night. Sometimes it's a kidney stone. Sometimes it's that we get the latest cold or flu or whatever is going on. Stephen says the recent U2.0 series of episodes of the podcast Hidden Brain cover a lot of similar ground. Highly recommend for those scheduled walks. Love that. Thank you, Stephen. We also have some called Brain Matters here at UA. Y'all can get those just with a quick Google search. Those are really good too. And then wildcard, this is the thing that only you would really probably appreciate, but it's something that you can do that's just for you. The Counseling Center has a great series that they often offer in the fall called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's a series of books that she's written about, how to stay in touch with your creative mind. It's geared toward people who are in art and in creative pursuits, but I think it's great in higher education and just academia, whether, whatever your role is, faculty, staff. It's so helpful to have something that sparks some creativity. So your wild card could be that maybe you like to go hike, or maybe you like to go fish or canoe, or maybe you want to go play golf, or maybe you want to have an artist date at a coffee shop, on your lunch break or one afternoon or one weekend, and go and do something that's just for you that maybe only you would appreciate. Sometimes that feels like a little luxury that, it gives you an extra boost because you feel like you're really treating yourself. And so for life, oh, someone said tap class. Yeah, I think that's great. What was the author's name? Julia Cameron. Let me put that in the chat. Called The Artist's Way, and she has other books as well, and she's very much on social media in mainstream bookstores. So when you see her work, you'll be able to find all of her books. So life, this is everything beyond work, and this is usually the content that I teach when Allison and I co-teach this class. And I like to say there's no such thing as work-life balance. There are work-life choices, and you make them and you have consequences from them. So that's a quote from Jack Welch. And I think that's so true, because work-life balance makes you feel as if everything can be perfectly in balance. We think about the scale, the justice scale, where they're evenly balanced, and that's justice. We see that scale used so much for work-life balance content. And y'all, that sets us up for failure or for feeling like we're failures because we think that we have to be 50-50. And I cannot imagine that any of us on this call have everything divided out evenly and feel like you're doing well in every area of your life. I don't feel that way. I imagine most of you don't feel that way. And you're not going to have a perfect balance. You're not always going to leave at 4:45. You're not always going to get to work at 8 o'clock. You're not always going to have everything perfectly running smoothly at work and at home. Sometimes you've got to give more effort and energy to your home life, especially if you've got kids who are not sleeping through the night, or you've got kids who are transitioning through their teen years, or maybe you're caregiving for a family member. That is going to require a little bit more energy. That's a season of life, and you just have to recognize that. At work, there are definitely ebbs and flows. Anyone who's worked in higher education and lives their lives in semesters knows that the beginning of the semester and the end of the semester, there's just a lot going on to get ready for the semester, to close out the semester. So depending on your jobs, I worked as a office associate too before I went back to nursing school here at UA. And there were moments where, there were really busy times that, it just was exceptionally busy and I had to do more work. I had to stay later, or I had to do less at night so that I wasn't so tired the next day. Same thing in my faculty role. And so definitely true in nursing. You have ebbs and flows like that. So whatever your, field and expertise is, whatever your work life is like, I'm sure that's true for you as well. So this is one that really helps guide me. Thanks, Lisa. You can catch the end of the recording. We'll have it posted soon. Every single time you say yes to something, you're actually saying no to something else. And so it's important to choose wisely. So when you're saying yes to a decision, you're saying yes to, staying late at work, then you're saying no to your loved ones, whether that's children, or maybe that's a pet, or maybe that's, a partner. You're saying no to someone else. And so that's something to really consider. If I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And then when you go to make your decisions, you can really think about, where am I going to make the hard choices? If you struggle with this, you can have a committee of no. So this can help determine your best yeses. So having 2 to 3 people who know you well, who you can ask, hey, do you have a few minutes to let me run this by you? What do you think? So you can ask yourself, does this align with my goals and values? Does this move the needle forward on my goals, my work goals, and my life goals, so personally and professionally? What am I saying no to by saying yes to this? And then keep that in mind, that every yes is a no to something else. So I recently had to make a decision about whether I was going to run for an elected office in an organization. It had been a really long-term goal for me. And I'm talking about, more than 10 or 15 years, a goal for me to run for this office, and an opportunity came up that I hadn't expected. And this was a goal that I had before I was married, before I had children. And so, as a goal that long term, you don't think about the impact that that's going to have personally on you. And so I had to think about, does this align with my goals and values? Do I have time for this? Is it going to move my needle forward? What am I saying no to? It's going to be saying no to some, family time. Is that okay with me? Is that okay with my family? So I asked my kids. I asked several people in my work life here at my college, how is that going to impact things here? I'm going to need to travel for some of that. And so it took probably 6 months for me to decide, because it was a 4-year commitment. So it was a big commitment. I usually don't take 6 months to make a decision, but this one I did. And even though I had worked all of this out, I had journaled things down, I had reached out to friends, had reached out to Allison, I had an idea of what I was going to say, and then I made a different choice than what I had anticipated. And I'm happy with that choice, but it took a lot of inner work. And for me, I like to process things out loud. I wanted input from other people, because I wanted to know if there was something maybe I was missing, maybe I missed a different perspective. One thing I always ask myself too, I didn't list it here, is what am I going to regret more? If I say yes, am I going to regret that more than saying no? And that often helps me. So those are some things that y'all can think about. You can also use the Eisenhower decision matrix. You can think about, is this urgent? Is it not urgent? Is it important? Is it not important? So how you use it is, if it's important and it's urgent, then you need to do it, and you need to do it now. If it's important but it's not urgent, then you can decide and you can schedule it. So the reason that we get things done is because we put them on our schedules. I'm going to talk more about that. If it's not important and it's urgent, can we delegate it? And I'm going to talk more about delegation. If it's not important and it's not urgent, can you delete it? Can you just eliminate it altogether? So deciding and delegating, a lot of times delegation, we end up feeling like, well, I don't have the money to hire a housekeeper. I don't have an office associate that can help me. I don't have, you know, a personal chef. I don't have all of these amenities or budgets for that. And so how can I delegate? I don't have anyone to delegate to. Well, it might be that you delegate to a Roomba, right? Maybe you save money and you get a vacuum cleaner that you can run. It may not be a housekeeper, but maybe you can delegate the vacuuming to your robotic vacuum cleaner that you've saved up for. I don't have one, but I want one. It's on my wish list. Maybe you don't have a personal assistant, but maybe you have a high school student in the neighborhood that can help you with yard work or babysitting kids or checking on your dog or whatever it is. So I want you to get creative about the things that you could delegate. It doesn't mean we got to vote for the Roomba. I love it. Okay, I'm moving it up the wish list then, Gina. There are things that you can do that traditionally can be delegated. Maybe you're delegating, tasks by scheduling them in the future so that you're not having to think about them. So it doesn't mean that you have a paid person that you're able to delegate to, but maybe you get creative with what you can take off your plate. Maybe you trade babysitting with another family. Maybe you trade errands with another family. Maybe if they're going to Costco in Birmingham, they can pick up some groceries for you. Or, maybe that you get their mail for them when they're on vacation. Whatever it is, be creative. Don't let money or time or lack of resources, make you think that you can't do this, because I did that. I used that as an excuse for a long time of why I couldn't delegate. And then deciding things. We show up to our dentist appointment because it's on a specific day at a specific time at a specific place with someone who's counting on us to be there and who's probably going to charge us if we're not there, right? It's accountability. So I want you to start scheduling your walks. I love that Stephen used that language. Schedule your walks, schedule your you time, schedule your self-care, make it an appointment in your Outlook calendar, just like you were meeting someone. Schedule your lunches, put that in your calendar, because you deserve that time, and that's a way to set a healthy boundary. It's also a way to help ensure that you get it done. Think of your balance not as that scale that you typically see, like we talked about the justice scales, but think of it as more of a budget, as a balanced budget instead, where you account for all of your time. Some people will say, oh, well, I don't get to be spontaneous, or that takes out the fun. Well, no, when you know that things are going to get done, you can have more fun and you can say more yeses if that's what you choose to do. But leave margin in your day. So don't kind of right up into that deadline. Leave 10 minutes every hour to be able to go to the restroom, to be able to get some water, to be able to take a quick walk, to be able to say hello to your neighbors and your colleagues. If you have about 8 hours for work, then you have about 8 hours for sleep. You have about 8 hours for personal. And I know that doesn't always work out prettily because, you're driving to and from work, or you've got, errands and things to do. So that's not 8 hours of personal free time every day, but it is time that you can actually start to use, and be deliberate about that, because a lot of times our work and our sleep have hard and fast stop and start times, but our personal time can really kind of get evaporated. It can go to things that aren't as important to us. It can go to social media scrolling. It can go to, kind of like mindlessly watching TV. And before you know it, we feel like we don't have time, but we've really not utilized our 8 hours the way we would prefer to utilize it. You also want to think about work-life balance, not just as harmony, but as work-life integration. So how can I show up for my best self to my work and career, to show up well in my health and well-being, in my community and feeling connected, and then in my home and family? And where do you want to make the most changes? That's going to be a personal decision for you. So like I said, what gets scheduled gets done. Make appointments with yourself and keep them just like you would any other appointment. and schedule everything. I tell my students and I tell my health and life coach clients, your rest, your fun, your downtime, your errands, when you're going to pick up your grocery pickup order, or if you're going to go shop, when you're going to go shop, when you're exercising or walking, the housework you need to do, when you're going to be doing your laundry, your, date nights or friend nights, your all of your things that you're doing. When is that going to happen? It needs to have a specific day and a specific time, and keep those appointments. Everything gets the date, everything gets the time, and it goes on your calendar or in your Outlook. Review your calendar every day. If you're not looking at your calendar multiple times a day, it's not really serving you. And remember that your brain likes to process information. In that way, it is like a computer, but it does not like to store information. And we have way too much going on in our lives today to be able to store everything without having it written down. Create rhythms and routines. So know that Sunday is grocery pickup day. Know that Friday is when you fill up with gas and get a car wash. Know that, Tuesday is when you do laundry, or Thursday is when you take your tap class. Batch like tasks together. So, work in your email, respond to those emails, and then close Outlook, and then do your other work, and then go back in when you're ready to do more email. Don't have it constantly running in the background. Keep notes about your work, especially if you're frequently interrupted like I am. Have a place in your notes on your Outlook, or you can get the sticky note feature on your computer desktop, or you can just use a traditional sticky note and write notes down so that if you get interrupted and you're going to have to step away from your work, you know where to come back to. You also want to leave breadcrumbs. So if it's hard for you to get started on your work, then stop in a place where you feel like you can pick back up. Try not to multitask, because it drains your battery or your brain power a lot faster than if you're just single tasking. Try not to skip meals, take those breaks, build that margin in, and crowdsource for strategies, to manage your life well. Parkinson's law, if you do not set a deadline, then what happens is the work expands to the time available. So oftentimes that's why we procrastinate, because we're really thinking about, if I have a week to do it, I'm going to take a week. If I only have an hour to get that report done, I'm probably going to get it done in an hour. Set a timer. The Pomodoro method is really helpful. To set a timer for 25 to 45 minutes, and then take a 5 to 15-minute break. Do that for a cycle of 4 and take an extended break. This works well if we're working 8 to 12. We can do 4 cycles of the Pomodoro and then take our lunch break, and then come back and get about 4 more cycles in. Super, super simple technique that works so well. Most people are like, that's too simple to even work. I was one of those people, but it does work beautifully. And so this could really help you, especially if you want to try to beat the timer. That is a good motivator. All right. And then what's your frog? Do the thing that you want to avoid most first thing in the morning. And so eat the frog is perfect for anyone who struggles with procrastination or just isn't making productivity a priority. Maybe they're not making progress, or they're just having trouble. Maybe they feel overwhelmed. Everything that you need to get done, do the first thing in the morning that you're just kind of avoiding or not looking forward to. And that was a quote attributed to Mark Twain, that if you eat a live frog first thing in the morning, nothing worse can happen the rest of the day. Know your finish line. Our finish line is usually about 4:45. So by 4:30, then you want to stop and wrap up your day. Make notes about where you're leaving off and what you need to start with the next day. Knowing your finish line really helps. And speaking of finish lines, we're kind of approaching ours, but we're going to stay on. You can leave if you need to, but I'm going to stay on for questions at the end. Here are some transition strategies from home to work, and Marina's already popped this in the chat. And then work to home. So things like showering, changing clothes, parking when you get home and doing a couple of minutes of a meditation before you go into the house. That helped a lot when my kids were young. Putting your phone away on charge in another room. Some great transition strategies, both going to the office and coming home from the office. So I love these tips. They're really practical and they help me out a whole lot. Life switches, knowing when to pause when you're having a major life change. Maybe you've had a loss, maybe you've had a significant health scare or stressor. Just know that these are some tips that you can walk through. Stop, pause. Don't expect for you to be as productive as you typically are. Don't treat yourself like a robot. Let yourself really take a break. Grieve if you need to. Sometimes we're even grieving our own health. It's not just that we lose, our lose a person. It could be that we lose our sense of normalcy or that we lose something that's important to us outside of a person. That also warrants grieving. We're human, we can grieve. And then think about weekly check-ins. Here's some questions that you can ask on that coffee date or that artist date. What do I want to say yes to? What do I want to say no to? What can I do to be less busy? How long has it been since I've done something fun or new or just for me? What's that wild card that you want to try? What are the warning signs that my life's getting out of balance? What can I change? What can I do to have better relationships and feel more connected? So those are all things that I hope will be helpful. This is a toolkit of resources beyond just the ones I've mentioned. And so I'm just going to let y'all preview them here. Some books that Allison and I both recommend that are really great resources as well. But again, don't read these in lieu of actually just taking a break. A break is probably going to be more beneficial. And then please do follow us on our social media. Ashley and Carolyn and Miranda do a wonderful job with keeping those resources engaging and updated. And then this is some more information for y'all. I'm happy to take questions and feedback. Oh, Gina, thank you. That makes my day. I'm so glad that that was helpful. And thank y'all for the engagement. Y'all have made it a fun class for me too. Good. I'm so glad. I always want y'all to walk away or leave the call with some really good practical things to do and not just a message of don't be stressed. That's not always the most helpful. Good. I'm so glad. Yes, the recording will be on the website. So Miranda will get that posted in the next couple of days. And y'all can go to wellness.ua.edu/webinars, and there's archived webinars. All of our most recent presentations are there. So y'all can always access them. They're YouTube videos, and so you can share them out. And we will also include the link to the self-compassion survey with that. We can put that in the description. I'm so glad y'all enjoyed it. Thank y'all so much. All right. Well, not seeing any other questions or comments, and so thank y'all so much for being with us today. I hope that y'all take some time for yourselves. Go right now and think of something you're grateful for and go block an hour with lunch or just something this week to do for yourselves. And I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Roll Tide.